everyone. It's indeed a great pleasure to be here with you all. I would really like to appreciate Intellicap for initiating this whole dialogue between people who have ideas, aspiring entrepreneurs, and people who have resources who are willing to back those ideas. I think it's a very important time in the growth of a nation like India or the developing countries. So why would I say that? Please go to the next slide. Can I move the slide from here? Give me a remote or something. Just move to the next slide and just give me a remote. So this is my agenda for this presentation. One is why are entrepreneurs the driving force of economy? I'll tell you a couple of reasons on a lighter side. So somebody came from US. They said, I'm going to India to set up a business. I worked in a multinational for about 15 years. So the person who was looking up to a mentor. The mentor said, you go to India and you become a thief or a pickpocket, there is one inspector chasing you. You start a business, there are 15 inspectors that are going to chase you. So starting a business in India is not very easy. So many people who are aspiring, I really appreciate your guts and the vision that you have. The second aspect is India does not rate very high on starting new business. It's about somewhere around the 125th on ease of starting a business in the country. So when you're trying to venture out into something, I think a lot of effort needs to go into this whole process, and I really would like to congratulate each one of you for going there. I think the most critical element, I'm sure you're hearing dialogue about, there is no need for an individual income tax. Most of the income tax, 10% of our GDP comes as tax revenue, and that tax revenue comes from businesses. It could be a large business, it could be medium-sized business, small business. So 94% of the revenue comes purely from businesses, or 91. Individual income tax only contributes to 9%. So if each one of you aspiring entrepreneurs start working, you're only contributing to 9% of the potential money that is available for this economy to support the entire stakeholders. So I really appreciate, because you want to be part of the 91% solution. So let me move on to this macro space of healthcare. So I've kind of said why entrepreneurs are critical. This whole macro space of healthcare is like any other macro space. It could be education, it could be water, it could be energy. So as I am familiar with healthcare, I'm just taking it up and elaborating a little bit more. So I'm sure all of us are familiar with this. The country has gone through a tremendous change in the last decade and a half. We are all part of that change. We are kind of tip of the iceberg of what changes that could happen. We are all witnessing this. There is a rapid demographic transformation, urbanization, fragmented family system, aging, and also changes in lifestyle, changes in food habits, and the technology. The whole framework has changed. The reference points have shifted, pretty much shifting every day as we go along. So what has happened to healthcare because of all these changes starting from 1990s, early 1990s? Definitely there is more health awareness, better educated citizens, higher proportion babies born under medical supervision. A lot of good things have come into the country. The question that comes to our mind is, has this touched everyone in the society? Have we touched all the 1.2 billion people if you're referring to just India? Unfortunately, the answer is no. So as you can see from here, it is very obvious that a certain portion of our country in 2015, at least about 20% of our population still will earn about $1.25 a day. So that's a population still not part of this whole growth agenda. So whole discussion probably here is, how do you engage them in this whole process and build something sustainable so that they also contribute to this whole growth cycle, and in the process they also climb up in the value chain of their own lives. So the formidable challenges in healthcare: sedentary lifestyle, increase in non-communicable disease, access to healthcare in some areas being unsatisfactory. The biggest problem that would come is rise in medical costs. Healthcare inflation far outstrips your regular inflation. If your regular inflation, real inflation is say 7%, 8%, healthcare inflation is running at 15%, 18%. So if somebody had a surgery in early 2000, the same surgery would cost 3 times the cost today. So that's actually a major challenge for all of us, because most of the time when we talk about healthcare costs, we benchmark with the developed world, and we say we are only 1/10, but our per capita income is not even 1/10. So it doesn't compare as well as one would like to think of. So the major threats in the space of healthcare is obviously the shift to non-communicable disease. I'm sure you're familiar with diabetes, hypertension, cardiac problem, pulmonary problems, cancer. All of that would come into this picture. As the economy grows, this is going to be a major challenge that we all face. The other important aspect is growing elderly people. India has, at this point of time, they say close to 10% of the people above 60. So if you carve out a country of 120 million people, we are probably the fourth or fifth largest country with people of above 60 years. So this is going to be a major challenge. Japan is reeling under it. It is affecting its economy, it's affecting its growth. So the same situation can come. In our case, our per capita income is also low, so it's going to get compounded far more than what we see in a country like America or Japan. This is about the healthcare cost. I think this is going to be, as I said, a major challenge. There was a time when poverty led to illness. You know, they had malnutrition. You would have seen some of the pictures, right? Children have not eaten. They are skin and bones. So those are images that we don't see as much, because pretty much all over the world, the nutrition status has changed. Our basic health has pretty much been addressed to a large extent. But the challenge now is, imagine a person who gets an illness today, gets a cardiac problem. He goes into an intensive care unit and then gets a surgery. You're talking about a budget of about 500,000 rupees. And this man would have worked for 25 years to collect that money as a corpus. His PF, his gratuity, all put together would be about 5 to 7 or 10 lakhs, and he would need to pay a loan of 5 lakhs for educating his children. He again comes back into poverty. So what he tries to do for 2.5 decades to climb out, one disease and 15 days in intensive care unit can bring him back to the same situation. So all of us have to be a little more conscious about the costs when we refer to, in our context of developing countries. This is pretty much our healthcare expenditure in the country. We spend about $45 per person per year on healthcare, of which government spends about 25% and out of pocket is 75%. It's a very, very small amount of money that goes into healthcare. So the government has a plan to now take it from 1% to 3% of the GDP spent on healthcare. I would like you to see this comparison. So obvious, that is India and this is Singapore. Singapore's per capita income is $50,000. India's per capita income is $1,500. Singapore spends 3% of its GDP per capita income on healthcare. So Singapore spends $1,500 on the well-being of a person. The whole GDP of India is only per capita income is only $1,500. So the reason why I'm projecting is not to show you that we have a lot of problems. Definitely we do have a lot of problems, big challenges, but there comes a lot of opportunities. I don't think Singapore or US is going to be innovative in healthcare delivery. They don't have to be. There is abundance there. We, as a country, we don't have those abundance. We are constrained. So here is a wonderful platform for all of us to be innovative, for all of us to bring some solutions which can not only change care for our own people, but can challenge the conventional beliefs of the developed nations. I think that's what we can contribute. Today, if we can have a good solution, I think every developed country is looking for it. Everybody has an unsustainable healthcare system. Our problems they're a lot better than what the problems of US or what the problems of other developed countries are. I'm kind of going to my next part. This is more for aspiring entrepreneurs. Now, I've been part of this organization for the past 20 years now. This organization was founded in 1978. So over the decades, we have learned some lessons. I thought it will be good to share with you, and if it clicks a chord with you, that's exactly what we would like to happen. So what is blindness? A broad brush. 39 million people are blind in the world, of which about 12 million are in our country. India has a substantial percentage of blind people in the world. So he's our founder. He founded this organization at the age of 58 after he retired from the government service, Dr. Venkat Swamy. So this is his vision. The vision he started was to eliminate needless blindness by providing high quality, high volume, compassionate eye care to all. The challenge was eye care to all. When you talk about eye care to all, zero becomes a legitimate price point. You need to provide care, a substantial percentage of your care at a zero price point. So how do you figure that game of providing care at a zero price point? So the one lesson that we learned together was you have to be unreasonable. You can't be reasonable. You can't be conservative. You have to be unreasonable. That's how you are able to grow the organization to achieve the purpose. If 12 million people are blind, you can't have an incremental model. You may have to think at a certain scale and a certain levels of economies so that you can take advantage of all the things that would come with economies of scale. But being unreasonable does not mean that it has to be chaotic. There has to be a method to madness. There has to be an organized way of thinking. We can't jump around all over the place. And thanks to our founder, he also gave us a method to work and find out how to reach this purpose. So looking back at the organization, we feel we had these strong pillars, building blocks which help the organization. Very strong value system. The value system that says, whoever knocks your door, you provide eye care. The value system says you keep your eyes on the care that you want to give, not on the monetary aspects of the businesses as you scale up. So those are very strong value system. We still feel that those are the things that are holding the organization. He also was very fond of talking about McDonald's or Burger King. He said, if eye care can be provided the way that McDonald's is able to provide in every part of the world, the same facility, they're able to train somebody, a school dropout, to give the same food. It's not probably very similar, but you can take lessons like standardization, replication, training. All those things can be applicable to, at least in eye care, it's possible to do all those things. If you really have to marry those two, zero price point and a very innovative delivery system, then you will have to find out and figure out a way things are done, which is not done conventionally by any organization at that point of time. So this is what Aravind was in 1976, started with about 11 beds. So we are today more in Tamil Nadu and Pondicherry. So on a typical day, we would see about close to 10,000 patients. We do about 400,000 surgeries a year. It does about 8% of the country's eye care as of now, and 2% of the world's eye care at this point of time. There is a lot of space to grow, and probably we need to think of how to do that eventually. And the other important lesson that we have learned over a period of time is not be driven by the market, but you start driving the market. I'll give you 3 examples what had helped us from this paradigm of thinking. When Aravind was in the early 90s, when we were providing eye care, we were doing one sort of surgery for the paying patients, putting an intraocular lens, and one sort of surgery for the free patients without an intraocular lens. So our founding team sat and said, if our mission is to give eye care to all the same way, why are we differentiating? Why are we compartmentalizing care? So that's how we got into manufacturing. In fact, we tried to negotiate with multinationals at that point of time. Nobody saw a business model. Nobody saw a business potential at that point of time. So these 5 doctors came together and said, why don't we explore manufacturing? And that's how we got into manufacturing. Subsequently into consultancy and into research. So this is the Oro Lab, which is the manufacturing arm. It was established in 1992. Today, it has about 7% of the global market share. And it's a standalone organization. It's more than sustainable and reaches more people than Aravind Eye Care System in terms of individuals that it touches annually. And the other important thing that we have learned is it is not about one organization. You need to create an ecosystem so that every provider of eye care tries to become better. Then you can survive as an organization. You just can't have one center of excellence and all the rest rotting in the country. So a lot of sharing, a lot of learning went on over the years, and that's how Lions Aravind Institute of Community Ophthalmology came. We pretty much worked with a lot of countries lot of hospitals in the country as well as in other aspects of the other parts of the developing country. And also a basic research. See, this is another challenge that we are facing. Most of the research that is happening are happening in the developed countries. 99% of the research dollars are in the developed countries, addressing developed country problem. And I wouldn't blame them. It is their resources, they are addressing their problems. And it is high time now we start addressing our own problems. As our economy gets better, as our surpluses are getting better, and this is a time to plow in and try to address and not be dependent on someone else for our own solutions. The other important lesson that we have learned is boundaries. Where do you draw your boundaries when you start an organization or when you start trying to address a certain challenge? Effective patient care is a journey. I'm just giving you an example. Imagine a patient comes to, can I have the next? Can I have the previous slide? How do I move back? Can you just take the previous slide? For some reason, it's not coming. So what it does is, from awareness to getting care. It's a whole spectrum of things that one does. Most of the time, when you talk about healthcare delivery, you're only talking about intervention, a very narrow space of what you do. So this is something which we learned over the years. Where we draw the boundaries determines our opportunities. So if we can draw a boundary much larger, it may take some time. You may enter the spectrum at one level, but ensure that you are covering the whole spectrum as much as possible, because the patient does not know where he fits into the spectrum. You as a provider know where he fits into the spectrum. I'll give you one example. If somebody gets a myocardial infarction, a heart attack, where does the disease start? Does the disease start when he started having uncontrolled cholesterol, when he had a blood pressure, when he had diabetes, or the disease happened when he had a stroke or a myocardial infarction? This is because of a cumulative damage has happened over the last decade or two. So how do you take responsibility for the whole spectrum and not look at just interfering when the problem arises? This has given us a lot of opportunities over the years. Most of our services are designed for non-customers, because served customers in this field are very small. 10-20% of people who need eye care are being covered even today. So there are 80% of the people who are non-customers. How do you go after them structurally? And you make mistakes. All of us make mistakes. You fall down. What you are hearing about is successes of Arvind. If I can have to make a presentation on the failure, that will be a 10 times larger presentations. But over the years, you learn. You fall down, you get up, and people teach you, and you can learn from other industries as well. And this is outreach program. You can't do everything within your own premises. You need to go to the community and take care of their eye care needs as well. Interestingly, when we did this eye camp work, we felt very happy because there was a lot of momentum. Every week we are going to 30 community outreach programs. We are trying to screen people for eye care. And when we did a study, he said, what is the impact that we are making with these eye camps? To our surprise, only 7% of the potential people who needed eye care were getting eye care. The reason was we did not have a fixed facility. What we were trying to tell these people in the villages or in the rural area was every eye care condition can wait till we come the next time. That's probably true for cataract, but not true for a glaucoma or a diabetic retinopathy or somebody getting an injury. You'll have to have a presence then and there to take care of those problems. So this is, for the first time, we are confident now, for a 50,000 population, we are able to saturate eye care. We are able to go to 25 to 30% penetration within the first 2 years. So that gives us a fair amount of comfort that we are reaching everybody who needs eye care in that small community. We need to scale it up. We have covered about a 3.5 million population. It's a small on a 1,200 million population, but it's a good beginning is what we feel. The other important element that we have learned is how do you benchmark your institution? You know, when you start something like a solution for a problem, the existing benchmarks are very inadequate. The existing benchmarks have all the inefficiencies that are built into the system. So the lesson that we have learned is to challenge the existing benchmarks. Don't take them as a given, but at least hit 100% or 1,000% below the existing benchmarks that are there. I'll give you an example. So when I say benchmarks in all these levels, quality and excellence, efficiency, effectiveness, patient safety, patient-centered care. So this is a comparison between National Health Service UK versus Arvind. So number of surgeries that Arvind does is about 400,000 surgeries now. UK does about 600,000 surgeries. So this is the complication rate. Arvind's complication rate is pretty less than what is this in UK. It's understandable because when you build a certain scale, when you build a certain level of efficiency, people become good at doing what they are doing. And this is not very different. Toyota is obviously a better manufacturer, and they are also the largest manufacturer. So they go pretty much hand in hand when it comes to efficiency and outcome. So this is the cost differential. The cost of giving care for UK is about 1.6 billion pounds on their 600,000 surgeries, and for Arvind is about 14-15 million pounds for the 400,000 surgeries that we do. So if you kind of took the 1.6 billion as a starting point, you'll be happy with even 160 million. But you need to you have to challenge those conventions so that we can fundamentally create new ways of thinking, and new opportunities will start surfacing. Like we got into manufacturing, we got into consulting. So all those opportunities came because we were willing to look at benchmarks which are non-existent at that point of time. And also another important lesson that we have learned is stretching scarce resource. Resource constraint is a wonderful, as I said, opportunity to innovate and try out new things. So with one surgeon, 2 surgical tables, 2 scrub nurses, the same ophthalmologist productivity jumped by 600 to 800%. In a country where there is less human resource available. That was one of the wonderful ways to expand or magnify that person's capacity, and that helped us to be productive. And this is a comparison between all the other countries, even the other organizations, more in the government and the private. Most of them are inefficient not because they are individually not good, because the collective system is not efficient. It's creating that whole ecosystem that leads to the efficiency. The same doctor works at Aravind, the same doctor will go and work at elsewhere. So the doctor does not make the difference. It's creating that whole flow of patients, flow of inventory, flow of systems that need to organize the flow. All of that have to come together to be able to accomplish this. And also another thing that we have learned is, when you don't have trained manpower, how do you recruit young women from the village after their 12th standard and then try to train them? So we recruit about 600 young women every year. Cumulatively, we have trained about 18,000 women over the last 2.5 decades. So this becomes a sustainable workforce. You are making a difference in their lives, and they are making a difference in the organization's life, and also those millions of patients who show up to the organization. So they pretty much do all the routine tasks. And doctors are high up in the system, the value chain. So you need to debottleneck them as much as possible. And this workforce lets us to debottleneck them comfortably. Coming to the next lesson is, when do you think of the organization's DNA? You can't think of it after you get the money. You can't think of it when you're doing well. You will have to think of it in the early stages. Those are things that you're not tempted to change whatever resources, whatever valuations you get. So it is important to understand that over a period of time. And a lot of times when organizations scale up from a limited view of whatever we have seen, they try to align systems and activities. That goes very strongly. People bring in technology, people bring in everything, but they forget to align people to the purpose. So I think you need to have that alignment consistently built over a time. It's easy to get carried away when you're successful. It's easy to get carried away when 10 people are behind you appreciating your idea and are willing to back your idea. So you'll have to be very clear and articulate it, pretty much like write it and put it somewhere very clear to see and follow it, so that you're not swayed by what is happening in the external ecosystem, but you're driven by what you started your organization for in the first place. The other important element that we have learned over a period of time is more money is more problem. Financial resources are not a panacea for all our problems. In fact, it is better to have less money consistently. Being hungry keeps you more sane. With more money, we all tend to get a little foolish and little disruptive in our own thinking. So what we have learned over a period of time in Aravind Eye Hospital, the core activity is never to raise money for our core activity of eye care. We need to do it on our own. That's a choice of what we have taken. Part of the reason was we didn't have this ecosystem in the 1970s. We had to do this only organically as we built the organization one bed at a time or one patient at a time. So looking back, that has helped us to build this culture. That has helped us to look at all the resources available in the world and stand out and say, is this all that is going to help me? Or what is it I'm going to value and build the organization over the next, decades? I'll give you one example. There is a temple in the town I come from, Meenakshi Temple. Meenakshi Temple was built over 10 generations. One king in the first generation conceived the plan. It's an 18-acre plan. And the 10th generation built the temple, and it's standing for 1,000 years. How many of us are building an organization over the next 10 generations that can stand for 1,000 years? I think that's a very different paradigm. You're not in a hurry. You're not, the finish line is not there. You're not even going to finish. You're just going to pass the baton to someone else. So that brings you a lot of stability in your thinking. And you don't get carried away. I think those are important paradigms, important thought processes to have in one's mind when you're trying to build an organization. I'm going to kind of coming to my end of my presentation. The other important aspect is we all give a lot of importance to leadership, and it is very critical. All of you know, all of you aspiring entrepreneurs are leaders. You have to, today you will raise the money and start the place, but people are going to look up to you. You will have 10 people, 5 people, 500 people. All of them are going to look up to you. And you are kind of crowded with a lot of responsibilities. You can't have a central office to begin with to break up all these responsibilities. But what we have learned over a period of time, what is critical for leadership as the organization grows and evolves, is only this. Continue to sustain the passion. Continue to infect the organization and keep the organization aligned and in line with the purpose. Because that is one thing that is lost immediately as your organization becomes successful. Not lose the focus of why you came into existence in the first place. Let me kind of conclude with all the lessons learned. Being unreasonable, but with a structure in mind, not trying to be chaotic. Defining boundaries opens up opportunities. Benchmarking, moving beyond expectations, moving beyond wild expectations. Even you will be surprised on what one could do. DNA, build the values and systems around the vision. Be passionate as a leader and keep aligning the organization consistently. This is the last lesson I'm going to share from our founder. Why you're all here is not because somebody is willing to back your idea. It's $1 million idea or $1 billion idea. Because you are happy that you're doing something beautiful. All of you have intelligence. All of us have intelligence. All of us have capabilities. But to discover what is beautiful and what makes sense for us is a very critical element. And that's what we have learned from our founder. Thank you.